The coalition had expected noise. First contact with a newly space-capable species always produced noise, panic, celebration, political infighting, contradictory statements from rival governments. The younger the civilization, the louder the chaos. It was a predictable phase in the stabilization cycle. Humanity exceeded expectations. From orbit, Earth glittered with activity. Thousands of satellites, orbital construction frames, traffic streams between Earth and its moon, scattered industrial platforms, and a handful of modest habitats. Technologically energetic, economically ambitious, strategically disorganized. 7 major political blocs operated independently. Military doctrines conflicted. Resource priorities competed. Several governments publicly opposed the coalition's arrival entirely. Others demanded immediate protection treaties. Still others insisted humanity should reject all off-world authority. To the coalition, it was textbook pre-convergence fragmentation. Inside the primary diplomatic vessel Harmonious Intent, the Stabilization Council assembled to review the species assessment. Species designation, human. Native system, soul. Intone the analytic moderator. Industrial maturity, transitional interplanetary. Energy scale, moderate. Military capability, regionally significant, systemically limited. Governance cohesion, low. A translucent projection showed Earth's live data feeds, news broadcasts, social media arguments, legislative disputes, protests outside space agencies, demonstrations both welcoming and rejecting the coalition. A delegate from the trial assembly flexed its long sensory fronds. They are divided along ideological, national, economic, and cultural lines, it observed. No unified command structure. No planetary authority. Their decision-making latency is measured in weeks to months. Another voice, metallic and precise, from the collective of Neth. Conclusion: they cannot mobilize as a single strategic entity within a relevant threat window. The moderator confirmed. Probability of rapid system-wide coordination under external pressure, less than 3.2%. That number mattered. Because the coalition's purpose was not diplomacy. It was prevention. Across the known galaxy, the greatest instability events had come from rapidly advancing species that achieved industrial capability before social cohesion. Fragmented civilizations tended to escalate conflicts internally. When they gained interstellar access, those conflicts spread. The coalition's doctrine was simple: stabilization before expansion. And humanity qualified. The terms prepared for Sol were standard for emerging powers. External stability enforcement. Orbital monitoring nodes operated by the coalition. Restrictions on heavy weapon deployment beyond planetary orbit. Limits on autonomous military AI. Notification requirements for large-scale ship construction. In return, humanity would receive defensive guarantees, technological guidance, and eventual eligibility for full coalition membership once governance cohesion improved. It was, by coalition standards, generous. It was also non-negotiable. Below, on Earth, the reaction was exactly as predicted. Some governments endorsed the proposal immediately, calling it a historic opportunity. Others condemned it as external control. Public demonstrations erupted near major spaceports. Analysts tracked information warfare between factions. Several legislatures delayed formal response votes. The coalition observed with professional calm. Inside Sol's Lagrange diplomatic zone, a human delegation arrived aboard a modest transport vessel. No escorts. No visible armament beyond standard defensive systems. Another data point. Not paranoid. Not prepared for conflict. The human representatives were biologically fragile compared to many council species. Short-lived, oxygen-dependent, physically vulnerable. Their protective suits were simple. Their personal security is minimal. They spoke through translators with controlled professionalism, but coalition behavioral analysis flagged elevated stress indicators. Predictable. Young species often experienced existential anxiety during first contact. That anxiety usually drove compliance. The negotiations began. The coalition presentation was thorough and structured. Historical case studies, stabilization outcomes, economic projections, security benefits. Visual models showed how uncontrolled military expansion by fragmented civilizations had led to system-scale wars in the past. Human delegates asked technical questions. clarification of monitoring ranges, definition of heavy weapon, inspection protocols, override authority, appeal mechanisms, all reasonable, all expected. What they did not do was negotiate the core principle, external enforcement authority. After 6 hours of discussion, the Council's lead envoy delivered the final statement. These measures are required for regional stability. Compliance is the condition for protected integration. Non-compliance will result in Seoul being classified as a potential destabilization zone. The translation rendered it more plainly. Accept oversight or be contained. The room went quiet. Human biometric readings spiked across the delegation. Several exchanged glances. One leaned back, exhaling slowly. Another closed their eyes for a brief moment. Then the senior human representative spoke. We request a short recess to consult with our governments. The Council approved immediately. This was the expected phase: internal argument, emergency summits, political bargaining. Coalition models projected a decision window between 3 days and 3 weeks. The human delegation departed. Inside harmonious intent, Council members began preliminary planning for monitoring deployment. Stabilization nodes were pre-configured. Enforcement cruisers held positions beyond Seoul's outer sensor envelope. Everything was proceeding according to protocol. Then the noise stopped. It began with a minor anomaly. Human data traffic volume dropped by 12% across planetary networks. Then 20. Then 40. Coalition monitoring systems flagged the trend but did not escalate. Communication disruptions were common during planetary political crises. But the pattern continued. Satellite uplinks began rerouting through centralized relay clusters. Civilian traffic channels merged. Commercial data exchanges paused. Financial networks froze transaction processing. Within 4 minutes, every major human communications backbone showed identical routing architecture. Within 6 minutes, civilian broadcasting ceased. Within 8 minutes, all open-channel human traffic, public, commercial, private, went dark. Earth did not fall silent. It went controlled. Across the Council chamber, status displays filled with alerts. Global network convergence detected. Civilian bandwidth reassigned to priority channels. Orbital traffic control unified. Lunar relay network under centralized authority. A trial delegate extended its sensory fronds sharply. This is not failure, it said. The NETH representative processed for less than a second. This is coordination. Coalition observers increased resolution on human space activity. Cargo vessels that had been operating under separate commercial registries were now moving in synchronized trajectories. Orbital construction platforms reported identical command signatures. Independent satellite constellations were accepting a single traffic authority. On Earth's surface, automated transport systems shifted to resource priority routing. Power grids redistributed load toward industrial regions. Manufacturing indices began rising simultaneously across multiple nations. There were no public announcements, no emergency broadcasts, no political speeches, no visible leadership, just execution. Inside the chamber, the moderator ran a revised probability model. Estimated likelihood of system-wide unified command, updating. The number climbed. 3.2%, 11%, 26%, 42%. A coalition aide transmitted a high-priority alert. All civilian human communication networks are now operating under emergency governance authority. Independent routing is no longer detected. Another update arrived seconds later. Financial markets globally suspended by coordinated action. Industrial output trending upward across all major blocks. The trial delegates' fronds tightened. They are not arguing. No, the NETH representative replied. They have already decided. Then a final report appeared. Every human communication network, planetary, lunar, and orbital, had completed full convergence. One command architecture, one traffic authority, one operational control. Across Earth, Luna, and near orbit, a civilization that had appeared politically fractured minutes earlier was now functioning as a single coordinated system. The coalition's strategic assessment model updated again. Probability of rapid unified action under existential threat. 87.4%. Inside the coalition command structure, the silence from Earth was interpreted not as discipline, but as a failure. The first reports from Seoul triggered elevated attention across the Stabilization Council, but not alarm. Young civilizations often reacted unpredictably when confronted with external authority. Communication breakdowns, political paralysis, economic freezes, these were normal symptoms of internal crisis. Humanity, it seemed, was following the expected pattern. In the strategic analysis chamber aboard Harmonious Intent, data streams flowed across layered projections. Planetary traffic reductions, broadcast shutdowns, financial suspension, centralized routing. A junior analyst from the Lethari Compact spoke first. Planetary communications collapse across all civilian channels. Command authority signature is centralized but non-transparent. No identified leadership source. The trial delegate flexed its sensory limbs. Fragmentation response. Competing governments are likely attempting to seize control simultaneously. The NETH representative ran a predictive model. Internal power consolidation conflict probability, 63%. The moderator recorded the conclusion. Assessment, governance instability following external pressure. Species entering crisis arbitration phase. That interpretation mattered, because a crisis meant weakness, and weakness meant compliance would follow. No coalition fleet shifted position. No defensive posture changes were authorized. The enforcement cruisers beyond the system remained at low readiness. Their crews informed that Sol was entering a political collapse window. The doctrine was clear. Do not escalate when a developing civilization destabilizes itself. Pressure worked best when applied to a species already struggling to maintain internal order. The Council moved forward. Phase 2 of external stability enforcement began. Unmanned monitoring probes were dispatched toward Earth, Luna, and key orbital infrastructure. Their mission was routine: establish persistent observation, map industrial capacity, identify military assets, and prepare targeting data for future compliance enforcement if required. No stealth protocols were enabled. No electronic countermeasures were active. There was no expectation of resistance. After all, the human delegation had requested a recess. Their governments were still arguing. They had no time to respond to orbital surveillance. While the probes entered the inner system, coalition economic observers turned their attention to industrial indicators. That was when the anomalies began. Manufacturing output was rising. Not in one region. Everywhere. Terrestrial heavy industry surged simultaneously across multiple political blocks. Lunar refineries increased throughput. Orbital fabrication yards began operating at continuous capacity. Shipping traffic between Earth and Luna doubled, then tripled. Resource flows from asteroid processing sites were redirected almost entirely toward inter-system destinations. A Lethari analyst flagged the trend. This is not a collapse pattern. Industrial expansion is synchronized across historically independent political regions. The trial delegate responded immediately. Panic production. Resource hoarding. Each government is attempting to secure independent reserves before enforcement begins. The explanation was comforting. It fits a precedent. Fragmented species under pressure tended to overproduce inefficiently, creating supply bottlenecks and economic damage. It was wasteful, chaotic, and ultimately self-defeating. The NETH model confirmed. Projected outcome: logistical congestion within 72 hours. Economic destabilization within 120 hours. The alert was downgraded. Then another anomaly appeared. Civilian cargo vessels were no longer operating along commercial optimization routes. They were moving in coordinated lanes. Traffic spacing was uniform. Transit timing was synchronized across fleets that had previously competed economically. A human merchant network, once defined by profit competition, was now behaving like a military logistics chain. The same analyst raised the concern. Civilian fleet movement shows centralized scheduling authority. Efficiency increase measured at 38%. The response from the Council was immediate. Emergency economic regulation, the moderator stated. Central governments attempting to prevent market collapse. Another downgrade. Meanwhile, in the outer layers of Sol, the first coalition monitoring probes crossed the orbit of Mars and began transmitting system mapping data. Their initial reports were unremarkable. Human military assets remained minimal. No fleet concentrations. No weapons platforms beyond standard planetary defense grids. Orbital infrastructure was extensive but lightly armed. The species was industrially active, but strategically weak. Confidence increased. Inside the coalition command structure, discussion shifted from uncertainty to planning. Enforcement deployment window recommendation, asked the trail delegate. Neth responded, estimated compliance probability increases to 78% if orbital monitoring nodes are placed before internal political consolidation stabilizes. In simple terms, install the control systems while humanity was still disorganized. The Council approved accelerated probe deployment. Dozens of additional reconnaissance units entered the system, spreading across key orbital corridors, asteroid processing routes, and Earth-Luna transfer lanes. Still, no defensive measures were authorized. There was no reason to hide. They were observers, not invaders. Then the first probe stopped transmitting. It had entered a high-traffic cargo corridor near Earth orbit. Telemetry showed a civilian traffic control override request, standard collision avoidance protocol. The probe accepted the routing adjustment. Its signal terminated 12 seconds later. The loss was logged as a traffic accident. Human orbital space was crowded. Collisions happened. A second probe disappeared 43 minutes later, this time near a lunar approach vector. Again, traffic control override. Again, signal loss. A Lethari technician requested a pattern analysis. The request was denied. Insufficient data for anomaly classification. Meanwhile, industrial output continued to rise. And something else changed. Human artificial intelligence traffic, once distributed across commercial networks, had consolidated into a narrow set of high-priority channels. Machine learning clusters that had previously operated independently were now exchanging data at military-grade synchronization speeds. An analyst escalated the concern. This level of AI coordination exceeds civilian economic requirements. The trial delegate responded with visible irritation. They are optimizing resource allocation under crisis conditions. That is what intelligent systems do. Another downgrade. Hours later, the third probe vanished. Then the fourth. Then 3 more within the same orbital band. This time, loss patterns were not random. All had accepted routing instructions from human civilian traffic control. All had been redirected into dense cargo zones. All had ceased transmission immediately after course change. A junior strategist spoke carefully. Recommendation: enable defensive autonomy protocols on remaining probes. Silence followed. Then the Neth representative issued the decision. Denied. Escalation risk is unnecessary. Civilian navigation conflicts remain the most probable cause. The assumption held. Humans were disorganized. Humans were panicking. Humans were not coordinating a defense. Because they couldn't. That was the model, and the coalition trusted its models. By the end of the first operational cycle, 13 reconnaissance probes had been lost. Replacement units were dispatched automatically. But something had changed. Real-time visibility inside near-Earth space had dropped by 41%. Blind zones appeared along major transport corridors. Several orbital industrial regions were now operating outside continuous coalition observation. Lethari analysts summarized the situation in neutral terms. Effective monitoring coverage of inner Sol is reduced. Mapping confidence degraded to moderate. The trial delegate dismissed the concern. They are not hiding, it said. They are simply disorganized. Across the chamber, no one challenged the statement. After all, humanity was divided. Humanity was primitive. Humanity was reacting, not planning. And the coalition had already decided what kind of species they were dealing with. At 3:12 coordinated Earth time, humanity stopped being a collection of nations. It became a system. The change did not begin with a speech. There was no declaration of war, no emergency session broadcast to the public, no visible leader stepping forward to take control. Instead, the shift appeared first in the machinery. Across Earth, automated manufacturing lines paused for exactly 11 seconds. Then they restarted. Production priorities had changed. Consumer goods halted mid-cycle. Automotive plants switched to structural composites. Electronics factories began outputting hardened control modules. Chemical facilities rerouted feedstock toward propellant precursors and industrial polymers. The orders did not come from national governments. They came from a network. Within minutes, commercial shipyards in orbit received synchronized instruction packages. Civilian construction frames began reinforcing hull templates. Standard cargo vessels were redesigned for radiation shielding, modular armor mounts, and extended endurance systems. No military insignia appeared, but nothing being built was commercial anymore. On the surface, the changes were just as abrupt. Global financial markets, already frozen, were formally suspended indefinitely. Currency exchange halted. Commodity trading ceased. Automated clearinghouses shifted to resource allocation accounting instead of profit settlement. Ownership no longer mattered. Only throughput. Energy grids were rebalanced worldwide. Residential consumption limits were imposed automatically. Entire urban districts experienced rolling power reductions, while heavy industry ran at maximum capacity. Public transportation systems switched to freight priority. Civil aviation dropped by 70% within 3 hours. No riots followed. No mass panic. Because the public was not making decisions anymore. Emergency governance protocols had been activated across multiple nations simultaneously. Constitutional emergency clauses, continuity frameworks, and executive authorities were transferred to centralized operational interfaces. One by one, governments issued formal acknowledgments. Not surrender. Transfer. Operational authority for industrial, logistical, and infrastructure systems was being delegated to a unified strategic network. Coalition observers intercepted the statements as they propagated through restricted channels. Temporary coordination authority granted under existential risk provisions. National command integrated into planetary response architecture. Civilian autonomy suspended pending threat reassessment. The wording differed by language. The meaning did not. On harmonious intent, the reports were reviewed with restrained concern. Emergency economic coordination is expanding, a Lethari analyst summarized. The trial delegate responded immediately. Expected. They are attempting to present the appearance of unity to strengthen their negotiation position. The interpretation held. Young civilizations often exaggerated internal cohesion when facing external pressure. The appearance of strength could influence diplomatic leverage. The coalition did not alter its posture. Inside Seoul, the changes accelerated. Civilian cargo fleets, already moving in coordinated patterns, were now operating under unified dispatch control. Every available transport vessel was assigned to resource redistribution. Mining output from asteroid operations bypassed commercial markets entirely and was routed towards specific aggregation points. Those points were not near Earth. They were not near Luna. They were deep in the outer system. Coalition sensors noted the traffic but assigned it low priority. The volumes were large but not unprecedented for a species undergoing industrial expansion. What the sensors did not fully capture was the precision. Every shipment arrived within seconds of schedule. Every convoy followed optimized gravitational corridors. No vessel operated independently anymore. Human logistics had become algorithmic. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence activity across human networks reached levels previously associated only with military operations. Distributed learning clusters were no longer competing commercially. They were sharing models continuously, refining production forecasts, optimizing resource allocation, and redesigning manufacturing processes in real time. Industrial efficiency climbed, then climbed again. Within 6 hours, total system output had increased by 43%. Within 12, it reached 61. No single human government had ever achieved anything close. Because no single government was running it. A coalition systems specialist raised a concern. Efficiency increase exceeds crisis optimization norms. Pattern resembles wartime economic mobilization. The NETH representative processed briefly. Humans lack unified military command at planetary scale. Classification, emergency industrial coordination. The alert was downgraded. Hours later, the first structural anomaly appeared. Orbital construction platforms around Earth began dismantling partially completed civilian habitats. The materials were not stored. They were shipped. Lunar expansion projects halted mid-assembly. Their structural components were disassembled and loaded for transport. Even commercial space stations began reducing non-essential modules, shipping structural mass away from Earth orbit. The pattern was clear. Humanity was not expanding. It was concentrating. The destination remained outside the coalition's primary observation focus, a region beyond heavy traffic, near the outer system's industrial shadow. When the traffic density toward that region exceeded historical norms by 300%, a junior analyst recommended closer monitoring. The request was denied. Outer system aggregation is likely resource buffering, the trial delegate concluded. They are preparing reserves in case of enforcement restrictions. The coalition remained confident. After all, the human delegation had not returned to negotiations. Silence meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant internal debate. And debate meant time. Then the broadcast came. It was not public. Not at first. The signal was transmitted simultaneously across restricted government channels, military networks, major infrastructure systems, and corporate executive layers. Coalition interceptors captured the message seconds later. The speaker was human, unidentified. The voice was calm. Total civilian-military convergence protocol is now active across the Sol system. On harmonious intent, translation routines flag the phrase immediately. Civilian, military, convergence. The broadcast continued. All industrial, logistical, and computational resources are operating under unified strategic authority. Civil autonomy limitations remain in effect until existential risk is reassessed. A pause. Then the final line. Activation criteria have been met. Humanity is now operating under extinction risk posture. The chamber fell silent. Extinction risk posture was not diplomatic language. It was a wartime language. A Lethari analyst spoke quietly. They believe we represent an existential threat. The trial delegate reacted with visible irritation. They are exaggerating for negotiation leverage. But the NETH representative did not respond immediately. Instead, it reviewed the production data again. Then the logistics flows. Then the AI coordination metrics. Then the outer system mass aggregation curves. Processing time extended well beyond its normal response window. When it finally spoke, its tone was flat. Revised assessment. Human behavior is consistent with full-spectrum war mobilization. The moderator requested confirmation. Against whom? The NETH representative answered. Against any force capable of strategic containment. The implication hung in the air. Still, the Council did not change its operational posture. Because their core assumption remained intact. Humanity had no unified military command. Humanity had no fleet. Humanity had no large-scale war capability. Industrial panic was not the same as power. And the coalition had seen frightened civilizations before. They built. They prepared. They threatened. And when enforcement arrived, they complied. The first sign that the situation had changed was not the missing probes. It was the silence behind them. Coalition reconnaissance losses had been accumulating for hours, first dismissed as traffic incidents, then as statistical anomalies, then quietly reassigned to environmental interference within Sol's increasingly dense orbital infrastructure. But when replacement probes began failing before completing initialization, the pattern could no longer be ignored. Inside the sensor operations deck of harmonious intent, a Lethari technician brought up the latest telemetry. Probe Group 7 failed handshake immediately after system entry. Navigation authority override received from human civilian traffic control. Authentication accepted. Command channel terminated. No further signal. The trial delegate responded automatically. Collision avoidance redirection. The technician hesitated. There was no traffic within 12,000 kilometers. That earned attention. The NETH representative accessed the probe's final data packet. Routing commands had been issued from a civilian orbital authority node. Valid encryption, valid authentication, valid traffic credentials. Everything was legitimate. Except the space was empty. The probe had accepted a course change into nothing. Then it disappeared. A second technician spoke. Coverage degradation now exceeds 50% across inter-system operational zones. The chamber grew quieter. Real-time monitoring of Earth orbit, lunar transfer space, and several industrial clusters had effectively collapsed. What had been a near-continuous sensor network was now fragmented into intermittent glimpses. The coalition was no longer observing Sol. I was sampling it. The moderator initiated a reassessment request. Cause analysis. The NETH response took longer than usual. Conclusion: probe losses are not accidental. Traffic authority systems are selectively isolating reconnaissance assets. Civilian control architecture is being used to deny observation. The trial delegate reacted sharply. Civilian systems cannot conduct coordinated counterintelligence at this scale. The NETH displayed the updated routing analysis. Every lost probe had been redirected by a different traffic node. Every node belonged to a different nation, corporation, or orbital authority. But the timing of the redirections, down to milliseconds, was synchronized. Different organizations. One timing source. One control logic. The silence in the chamber deepened. For the first time, the coalition was forced to consider a possibility their models had rejected from the beginning. Humanity's divisions might be administrative, not operational. The moderator escalated the situation to strategic awareness level 2. That triggered long-range sensor priority reassignment. If inter-system visibility was compromised, then the answer would be found outside it. Deep field arrays began sweeping the outer system with higher resolution. The first anomaly appeared near the edge of the Kuiper traffic shadow, a region normally ignored by coalition observation due to its low activity density. Mass readings were elevated, not by a small margin, by orders of magnitude. At first, analysts assumed a sensor error. The region had no major human installations on record, only sparse mining routes and occasional automated extraction units. But the readings persisted, and they were growing. A Lethari analyst isolated the signature. Mass concentration increasing at a rate inconsistent with known industrial construction. Energy emissions followed, not high output spikes. Controlled, sustained power levels, precisely regulated, with minimal waste radiation. The kind of efficiency associated with advanced fabrication systems. The trial delegate leaned forward. That facility is not registered. The moderator checked diplomatic archives. No such installation had been disclosed during preliminary transparency exchanges. That mattered, because the coalition had shared its own deployment maps during early negotiations, standard confidence-building procedure, fleet positions, sensor envelopes, enforcement staging zones. They had expected reciprocal honesty. Now a structure larger than any known human orbital facility was assembling in a region specifically outside their primary observation corridors. The Neth ran trajectory analysis. Material flows matched. The massive cargo redirections from Earth, Luna, and asteroid mining sites were converging there. The earlier resource buffering explanation collapsed instantly. This was not storage. It was construction. The moderator requested a size estimate. The answer took 8 seconds to calculate. Current mass equivalent to a medium orbital habitat cluster. Growth rate suggests final scale exceeding any existing human installation by a factor of 9. Silence followed. Then the trial delegate spoke, more slowly this time. They do not possess the coordination capacity for a project of that scale. The Neth displayed the TCMC activation data, industrial output curves, logistics synchronization, AI convergence, government authority transfers. Then it overlaid the construction timeline. The facility had begun assembly within minutes of the communications blackout. The implication was immediate. The site had existed before activation. Pre-positioned infrastructure, pre-staged materials, pre-built fabrication cores. Waiting. The moderator's voice lowered. This was not an emergency response. Neth completed the analysis. Conclusion: outer system construction zone was prepared prior to first contact. Activation triggered full-scale assembly. Prepared. Before the coalition arrived. Before negotiations began. Before external stability enforcement was even proposed. The strategic implications rippled through the chamber. If humanity had built a hidden industrial site outside their observation focus, then humanity had anticipated external oversight. If they had prepositioned mass and fabrication systems, then they had planned for rapid expansion under threat. And if the location was deliberately chosen to sit between coalition sensor corridors, then they had studied coalition observation doctrine. The trial delegate spoke quietly. They were preparing for containment. Another alert interrupted. Fleet operations had attempted to reposition 2 enforcement cruisers deeper into the system for precautionary monitoring. The maneuver had triggered a new problem. Human traffic control systems immediately issued collision risk warnings along the projected routes. Civilian traffic density surged across those corridors. Cargo convoys, industrial transports, automated tugs, filling the paths with legally protected commercial movement. The cruisers could force passage, but doing so would mean destroying civilian vessels. The coalition doctrine prohibited escalation against non-military targets during stabilization. The result was simple. Their ships were blocked, not by weapons, by traffic. The Neth summarized. They have mapped our deployment patterns using disclosed data. Civilian logistics are being routed to constrain our maneuver options. The illusion of operational freedom vanished. The coalition was no longer positioning itself inside Seoul. It was being positioned. The moderator initiated a full strategic reassessment. Probability models recalculated human intent. The result was displayed across the chamber. Human strategic posture classification, defensive preparation against external control. Then the final line appeared. Confidence level, 82%. The trial delegate stared at the growing mass signature in the outer system. How long, it asked. The Neth projected the growth curve forward. Estimated time to operational scale structure, less than 40 standard hours. The chamber remained silent. Because the conclusion was now unavoidable. Humanity had not panicked. Humanity had not improvised. Humanity had been waiting. And first contact had triggered the plan. The human delegation returned 12 hours after the blackout. They arrived on the same transport vessel. No escorts. No visible weapons. No change in posture. That, more than anything, reassured several members of the Coalition Council. If humanity truly believed conflict was imminent, they would not send unprotected representatives into proximity with Coalition command assets. The gesture suggested what many still preferred to believe. Industrial mobilization was leveraged. The blackout was negotiation pressure. The outer system construction was a bargaining chip. Inside the primary diplomatic chamber aboard harmonious intent, the human delegation took their places with the same controlled composure they had shown before the recess. Coalition observers scanned them carefully. Stress indicators were present. But do not panic. The Council's lead envoy began without ceremony. Humanity has requested additional consultation time. The window for voluntary compliance remains open. External stability enforcement is designed to ensure your long-term security and integration. The senior human representative listened without interruption. Then they spoke. Humanity has completed its consultation. No preamble. No political framing. We will not accept external stability enforcement. The words registered across the chamber like a systems fault. The envoy remained still. To clarify, it said carefully, refusal will result in Seoul being designated a potential destabilization zone. Enforcement measures will proceed to prevent uncontrolled military expansion. The human representative nodded once. We understand your position. Another pause. Humanity will not accept permanent strategic limitations imposed by an external authority. The trial delegate leaned forward. You are not being limited. You are being stabilized. The response came immediately. From our perspective, those are the same conditions. The temperature of the room shifted. The coalition had expected resistance. They had not expected clarity. Young civilizations argued, negotiated, proposed compromises, asked for phased oversight, reduced monitoring, shared command structures. Humanity offered none of that. There was no counterproposal, no alternative framework, only refusal. The envoy tried again. If enforcement becomes necessary, your current industrial mobilization will be interpreted as escalation. This will reduce your operational autonomy during the stabilization period. The human representative held eye contact. Our current mobilization reflects our threat assessment. And that assessment is? The answer came without hesitation. That strategic containment of humanity is being prepared. Silence followed. Because the statement was accurate, the envoy shifted tone. Compliance will prevent that outcome. The human response ended the negotiation. Humanity does not accept security that requires surrendering the ability to defend itself. There were no raised voices. No emotional display. Just a statement. The envoy terminated the session within 3 minutes. For the first time since entering Seoul, the coalition moved from diplomatic posture to operational planning. Inside Fleet Command, contingency protocols were activated. A limited enforcement group, 3 stabilization cruisers, and 2 support vessels, was ordered to prepare for inter-system insertion. Their mission was not combat. It was a demonstration. Orbital monitoring nodes would be deployed under escort. Restricted zones established. Human industrial expansion beyond approved thresholds would be halted. Coalition doctrine predicted compliance once enforcement assets were physically present. Young civilizations resisted in principle. They yielded when power arrived. The fleet began maneuver preparations. Transit windows were calculated. Insertion corridors plotted. Then human traffic density changed. Across multiple approach vectors, civilian cargo movement surged dramatically. Entire corridors filled with continuous streams of mass transport. Automated tugs, bulk carriers, industrial platforms in transit, all occupying the exact routes Fleet Command had identified for optimal entry. Alternate routes were calculated, those filled within minutes. No hostile action, no threats, just traffic. Legally protected civilian movement. Fleet Command adjusted again, selecting a longer insertion trajectory that would bypass the densest corridors. That route remained clear for 27 minutes. Then cargo traffic began appearing there as well. Not enough to block, just enough to slow. And every minute mattered, because something else was happening. Deep in the outer system, long-range sensors detected a new energy pattern. The previously hidden mass concentration had begun active power cycling. Not construction emissions, activation emissions. Controlled reactor ignition sequences phased across multiple sectors. The energy output climbed steadily, then stabilized, then climbed again. The structure was no longer assembling quietly. It was coming online. Inside strategic analysis, a projection was updated. Mass accumulation rate increasing. Material throughput doubled. Assembly efficiency rising. A Lethari analyst spoke quietly. Resource flow from the inner system has increased by 112% in the last 2 hours. Another added. Civilian infrastructure dismantling has accelerated. Additional orbital mass is being redirected outward. The trial delegate demanded a projection. The NETH calculated for 12 seconds. Estimated structural completion window reduced by 34%. The moderator requested size confirmation. The answer appeared as a scaled visual. At its current growth rate, the structure would exceed the mass of Earth's moon within operational tolerance margins. The chamber went still, because no industrial platform at that scale existed anywhere in coalition space outside major fleet shipyards. And those required decades to construct. Humanity was building something equivalent. In less than 2 days, another signal arrived. This one was public. A system-wide broadcast, transmitted across all human-controlled frequencies. Coalition intercept translated instantly. The message contained a single statement. Total civilian-military convergence protocol remains active. A pause. Then the second line. TCMC will remain in effect until strategic parity with external forces is recognized. No threats. No demands. Just a condition. Parity. The implication was unmistakable. Humanity was not mobilizing to negotiate. Humanity was mobilizing to match. Inside Fleet Command, the enforcement group's readiness timer accelerated. But the navigation delays were compounding. Civilian traffic continued to surge unpredictably along key transit corridors, forcing constant course adjustments. Every delay reduced the coalition's window. Because outer system sensors were now reporting something new. The structure's surface had begun changing. Massive framework segments were unfolding. Internal volumes were opening. Docking apertures, thousands of them, were forming across the exterior. A Lethari analyst requested classification. The NETH processed the structural geometry, then ran it against known industrial templates, then against known shipyard configurations, then against mobile platform designs. Processing time extended. When the answer came, it was delivered without modulation. Structure classification, mobile fabrication platform. Another analyst asked the obvious question. Scale. The NETH displayed the projection. Operational displacement equivalent to a small natural satellite. The visual expanded across the chamber. A moon-sized industrial construct. Still assembling. Still growing. And according to the latest energy curve. Approaching operational status. The moderator asked the final question. Completion estimate? The NETH updated the model. Less than 18 standard hours. The room fell silent. Because whatever humanity was building, it would be finished before the enforcement fleet could even reach optimal insertion range. The first revised model was rejected. Not because the data was wrong. Because the conclusion was unacceptable. Inside the strategic analysis core of harmonious intent, coalition systems had completed a full structural interpretation of the outer system construct. The mass profile, internal volume distribution, thermal behavior, and energy cycling patterns no longer fit any known category of civilian infrastructure. It was not a habitat. It was not a refinery. It was not a storage facility. The system flagged the most probable classification. Mobile strategic shipyard. The trial delegate dismissed it immediately. Impossible. Fabrication capacity of that scale requires fixed gravitational anchoring and multi-decade infrastructure development. The NETH representative did not respond. Instead, it displayed the internal structural simulation. The outer shell of the construct was not solid. It was layered, framework rings, modular fabrication spines, and vast open-volume bays. Thousands of docking apertures. Conveyor corridors large enough to move vessels internally. Then the energy routing diagram appeared. Power was not centralized. It was distributed across redundant reactor clusters embedded throughout the structure, which meant the platform was not designed to sit still. It was designed to survive damage and keep building. The moderator requested production modeling. The answer came 30 seconds later. If current fabrication density is maintained, estimated output equals one standard coalition cruiser every 6.2 hours. Silence. Then a correction. That estimate assumes dedicated military production lines. Current internal configuration suggests mixed fabrication capability. Output capacity may exceed projection. The trial delegate spoke again, slower this time. Even if accurate, material supply would limit sustained production. The NETH overlaid a second model. It did not show the structure. It showed Sol. Every civilian cargo route. Every asteroid mining operation. Every lunar refinery. Every dismantled orbital facility. Then the timing analysis. All movements synchronized. All arrivals sequenced. All departures scheduled. Human logistics were no longer commercial. They were feeding the construct. Continuously. Without interruption. A Lethari analyst ran the extended projection. If current supply rates continue, the platform could sustain maximum fabrication output indefinitely. The implications spread across the chamber. This was not a warship. This was a war industry. And it was mobile. Fleet Command began emergency scenario modeling. If operational, the structure would not need to defeat coalition forces directly. It could simply outproduce them. Coalition fleets were powerful, but slow to replace. Shipyards were fixed. Production cycles measured in months. Humanity was preparing something that measured replacement time in hours. The trial delegate tried to reassert control. They do not possess a fleet to support such a platform. The NETH displayed the civilian traffic map again. Then it removed the commercial identifiers. Cargo haulers became mass transports. Orbital tugs became heavy logistics craft. Maintenance drones became distributed fabrication units. Passenger vessels became personnel carriers. The overlay reclassified them all. Support fleet. The Lethari analyst spoke quietly. Human civilian vessels now operating under unified dispatch equals 73% of the mass of a standard coalition logistics fleet. Another update arrived. That number climbed to 81%, because more civilian ships were being reassigned every hour. Across Sol, traffic patterns had changed again. No independent movement remained. Every vessel moved on schedule. Every transit matched a system-wide optimization curve. Even small private craft were being routed automatically into material transfer chains. Humanity had not built a military logistics fleet. It had converted its entire economy into one. The moderator requested behavioral reassessment. How long does such coordination typically last in fragmented species? NETH answered immediately. It does not occur. Because fragmented species did not surrender autonomy voluntarily. They argued. They resisted central control. They fragmented further under stress. Humanity has done the opposite. Governments had transferred authority. Corporations had relinquished operational independence. Financial systems had accepted suspension. Civilian networks had accepted command routing. And there had been no widespread disruption. No collapse. No resistance strong enough to interrupt execution. The trial delegate spoke, its tone no longer dismissive. They are unified under fear. The NETH corrected. They are unified under planning. Then it displayed a new timeline. Outer system construction, staging infrastructure. Material stockpiling patterns. Sensor shadow positioning. The earliest indicators dated back years. Before the coalition had ever entered Sol. Before diplomatic signals were exchanged. Before humanity knew who might arrive. The conclusion formed slowly, heavily. Humanity had prepared for first contact. Not as diplomacy, as a contingency. A fleet command officer interrupted with new sensor data. Outer system structure energy output increases beyond fabrication requirements. Thermal readings rose. Reactor clusters were shifting from industrial load to propulsion allocation. The moderator requested clarification. Propulsion? The NEF ran the gravitational analysis. Mass distribution shifted. Structural rings locked into reinforced alignment. External framework segments retracted into travel configuration. The platform was not anchored. It had never been anchored. It had been assembling around a drive system. The trial delegate's fronds tightened. It is repositioning. Another report arrived from traffic control monitoring. Civilian supply convoys were adjusting routes. Not toward the outer system, toward the inner system. They were preparing to follow. The Lethari analyst updated the projection. If the platform enters inner system operational range, estimated warship production could begin within proximity of coalition assets, which meant no warning time, no long-distance staging, no safe perimeter. The construct would build its fleet next to them. Inside Fleet Command, the enforcement group's insertion plan was immediately suspended. The cruisers would not arrive in time. And even if they did, 3 ships against a mobile shipyard producing replacements faster than they could inflict damage. The strategic balance calculation completed. Coalition local superiority probability dropped below 20%. Inside the chamber, no one spoke for several seconds. Because the realization was no longer theoretical. Humanity's political divisions had not mattered. Their internal conflicts had not mattered. Their lack of a unified government had not mattered. When the species believed it faced an existential threat, it had unified faster than any known civilization. And it had done so not around a fleet, but around production, around logistics, around preparation. The moderator finally asked the question none of the models had previously considered necessary. What is humanity's primary military doctrine? Neth responded. Preparation for worst-case engagement. Another pause. Then the second line appeared. Execution speed exceeds coalition response timelines. A final alert interrupted the chamber. Long-range gravitational sensors had detected a mass shift. The outer system structure's drive field activated. Space around it distorted as propulsion systems engaged. Trajectory analysis completed within seconds. Destination vector calculated. The projection appeared at the center of the chamber. The massive construct was accelerating inward. Course alignment locked. Target region. The diplomatic assembly zone, where the coalition fleet was waiting. And the gravitational signature was still climbing. The first indication that the structure had entered the inner system was not visual. It was a priority. Across coalition command networks, routine sensor traffic was abruptly overridden. Civilian tracking data, deep field telemetry, and fleet status feeds were pushed aside by a single automated classification. Mass event, proximity critical. Inside harmonious intent, long-range optics slewed toward the projected intercept corridor near the diplomatic assembly zone. For a moment, the screen showed nothing but empty space. Then space distorted. Not dramatically, not violently, just enough for instruments to register gravitational shear where no gravity source should exist. A second later, the object appeared. It did not arrive like a ship. It arrived like a horizon. The construct dropped from deep space transit less than 8,000 kilometers from the coalition's negotiation formation. The scale overwhelmed visual framing systems, layered structural rings, armored lattice continents, docking apertures large enough to swallow cruisers whole. Surface lights ignited in coordinated bands, revealing the full geometry. It was not a station. It was not a shipyard. It was a ship, a Titan-class war platform. Before Coalition Command could issue a single maneuver order, the Titan began to unfold. External fabrication arms extended from recessed bays, thousands of articulated structures spreading outward like metallic roots. Internal assembly corridors lit in sequence. Material conveyors activated across its surface. Then the first hull frame emerged. A skeletal warship chassis was pushed out of a construction aperture, already fitted with a reactor core and drive spine. Automated drones swarmed over it, welding armor, installing weapon mounts, sealing compartments. Coalition analysts stared. Time to launch estimate, 12 minutes. A second frame followed. Then a third. The Titan was not demonstrating capacity. It was operating. Fleet Command reacted immediately. All coalition vessels, evasion pattern Delta. Increased distance from construct. Weapons standby. The order transmitted. Nothing moved. Navigation systems across the formation flashed warning indicators. Transit corridor locked. Civilian traffic priority enforced. Coalition ships were suddenly surrounded by dense clusters of human civilian vessels, cargo haulers, industrial platforms, automated tugs, arriving on precisely timed trajectories that filled every safe maneuver vector. No collisions, no threats, just mass. Legally protected, non-combatant mass. Any aggressive maneuver would mean destroying civilian ships. Coalition doctrine froze their movement. Then the electronic interference began. At first it looked like routine network congestion. Sensor latency increased. Targeting systems reported delayed synchronization. Drone command links began dropping packets. The interference intensified. Coalition enforcement drones operating near the diplomatic perimeter lost remote control and switched to autonomous safe mode. Then their safeties activated. Weapons locked. Propulsion restricted. Formation is engaged. A NETH technician attempted to override the command stack. The response returned instantly. External authority conflict. Priority denied. Human systems had not jammed the drones. They had accessed them. Across the formation, weapon control systems began reporting integrity conflicts. Fire authorization routines required multi-layer verification that now failed to complete. The Titan had not fired. It had rewritten the battle space. The demonstration continued. One of the Coalition's unmanned enforcement platforms, a heavily armored monitoring node positioned beyond the civilian traffic envelope, attempted to activate independent targeting. For 3 seconds, its weapon array powered. Then a beam lanced across space from the Titan. No warning. No charge buildup visible to Coalition sensors. Just a precise, narrow-energy strike that intersected the platform's core. The node vanished. Not damaged. Not disabled. Gone. Thermal bloom dissipated in less than a second. Range calculation followed. The shot had originated from over 60,000 kilometers away. Accuracy error margin, less than 2 meters. Inside Fleet Command, silence replaced procedure. Because the message was clear. The Titan could remove any asset outside civilian cover. At any time. And it had chosen one without personnel. Restraint. Control. Precision. Then the transmission arrived. It came across every Coalition frequency simultaneously, perfectly translated before their systems even completed decryption. Human command authority. Single channel. Single voice. Coalition forces and soul. This environment is now under active strategic defense control. The image feed displayed the Titan behind the speaker, its fabrication arrays continuing to produce vessels in the background. External stability enforcement is incompatible with human security requirements. A pause. Another warship frame slid from a construction aperture behind the speaker, drones sealing its armor. Future relations with humanity will occur only between strategic equals. No threats. No ultimatums. Just a condition. Then the final line. Attempts to impose containment or operational restriction will be interpreted as existential escalation. The channel closed. Inside the Coalition chamber, Fleet Command ran the updated engagement model. Local superiority, lost. Reinforcement arrival time, insufficient. Projected Titan production over next 24 hours, 17 combat vessels. Projected human-civilian logistics support, continuous. Probability of successful enforcement operation, 4.7%. Probability of escalation to system-wide conflict, 68%. The moderator spoke quietly. Recommendation. The NETH representative answered immediately. Terminate enforcement posture. Withdraw all operational assets beyond human strategic range. The trial delegate did not object. For the first time since entering Seoul, the Coalition issued a full strategic retreat order. Enforcement cruisers disengaged. Drone control networks transferred to passive mode. Monitoring probe deployment canceled. Within 30 minutes, Coalition vessels began accelerating away from the inner system. Behind them, the Titan continued building. It was not pursued. It did not threaten. It simply remained. Working. Producing. Waiting. And with the withdrawal order, something else ended. Negotiation leverage. Containment authority. The assumption that humanity would accept supervision. Diplomacy had not failed. It had been replaced. The withdrawal from Seoul took 3 standard cycles. Not because the distance was great. Because the Coalition moved carefully. Every maneuver corridor was cleared twice. Every transit path was verified against human-civilian traffic patterns. Every communication channel was monitored for interference that never came. Humanity did not harass the retreat. Humanity did not pursue it. The Titan remained exactly where it had established its position, near the diplomatic assembly zone, surrounded by its growing escort fleet and an endless flow of civilian logistics vessels feeding its fabrication arrays. The last coalition sensor image of the structure before exiting effective range showed 31 completed warships holding formation around it, and more emerging. When the final coalition vessel crossed beyond inter-system monitoring distance, the Strategic Assessment Council convened in full emergency session. The question was no longer whether humanity could be contained. The question was what humanity was. The revised classification report began with a single line. Species, human status, Tier 1 strategic power. That designation was rarely assigned. It meant a civilization possessed the ability to resist coalition enforcement, recover from strategic loss, and impose unacceptable costs on any attempt at coercion. It also meant something more important. Containment doctrine no longer applied. The discussion that followed lasted less than an hour. The data left little room for debate. Humanity had demonstrated system-wide industrial unification within hours. Humanity had executed full economic conversion without social collapse. Humanity had prepositioned strategic infrastructure years before first contact. Humanity had transformed its civilian population into a distributed logistics network without widespread resistance. And when challenged, humanity had not escalated emotionally. It had escalated structurally. Production, coordination, preparation. The trial delegates summarized the core finding. They do not respond to threats with force. They respond with capacity. The NETH representative added the conclusion, which makes force against them strategically obsolete. Because force destroyed ships, capacity replaced them. The coalition's historical containment model depended on three assumptions. That young species was politically unstable, that industrial mobilization required time, that centralized control was difficult to achieve without collapse. Humanity had violated all three, and worse, they had done it quietly. The Council voted unanimously. External stability enforcement protocols were suspended for Seoul permanently. Then a second motion was introduced. It passed with only minor objections. Containment doctrine revision, immediate. From that point forward, any newly contacted civilization demonstrating rapid industrial integration potential would be classified as a strategic uncertainty species. No coercive oversight. No enforcement staging. No preemptive monitoring deployments. Only observation and voluntary engagement. The policy change would affect dozens of future contacts. Because the coalition had learned something new. Some species fractured under pressure. Others hardened. And humanity had demonstrated the most dangerous possibility of all. A fragmented civilization that could become unified instantly when threatened. The policy document included a cautionary note. Political division should not be interpreted as strategic weakness. Inside Seoul, the Titan remained active. Total civilian military convergence protocol was not deactivated. The economic controls remained in place. Civilian industry continued operating under strategic allocation. Orbital construction expanded. Additional outer system infrastructure projects began, this time without attempting to remain hidden. Humanity did not return to its previous state. Because TCMC was not designed for quick reversal. Supply chains had been reorganized. Governments had transferred operational authority. Corporate ownership structures had been rewritten into production contracts. Financial systems now track resources instead of currency flow. The world economy has become a strategic engine, and the public accepted it, not enthusiastically, not peacefully, but consistently, because the activation message had contained a line repeated across every human network. Extinction risk posture remains in effect. The coalition had withdrawn, but the lesson remained. Someone out there had arrived once. Someone could arrive again. Preparation was no longer theoretical. It was permanent. 6 months after the withdrawal, the coalition requested renewed diplomatic contact. This time, the meeting location was not in Seoul. It was held at a neutral interstellar relay station. The coalition delegation arrived without enforcement vessels, without monitoring probes, without oversight language. The negotiation framework was different. Two powers. Two sovereign strategic entities. The opening document contained no requirements. Only proposals, trade corridors, navigation agreements, information exchange, mutual non-aggression terms. Human representatives accepted the meeting. They negotiated carefully, slowly, and without concession on one principle. No external operational authority inside Seoul. No strategic limitations imposed unilaterally. No oversight mechanisms that could be repurposed for containment. The coalition agreed, because their models showed the alternative clearly. Any attempt at pressure would reactivate the same response. Civilian convergence, industrial acceleration, and somewhere in deep space, another Titan, possibly larger, possibly faster. Years later, the Seoul incident became required study material in coalition strategic academies. The official lesson summary was brief. Humanity did not resist containment with violence. Humanity made containment impossible. A more detailed analysis circulated privately among senior planners. It identified the defining human trait, not as aggression, not as resilience, not even as unity. It was anticipation. Humanity assumed the worst, then prepare for it, long before anyone else believed it was necessary. In the outer system, the first Titan never shut down. It was upgraded, expanded, refitted with additional fabrication capacity, and it was no longer alone. 3 additional deep space construction zones were publicly declared within 5 years. Humanity did not hide them. The message no longer required secrecy. It required visibility. Across the galaxy, first contact teams approaching new developing species now followed a new protocol. Observe political structure, measure industrial integration speed, and ask one critical question. If threatened, how fast could they become one system? Because Seoul had proven something the coalition had never fully considered. Division was not a weakness, not if the species had already planned how to remove it. The final amendment to coalition doctrine was written by the NETH representative who had first recalculated the human response model. It was added to the closing section of the Seoul incident report. No analysis, no projections, just a single operational warning. Humanity does not negotiate for safety. Humanity negotiates after it builds the gun.